His breath was warm against my neck, the faint scent of coffee and cinnamon lingering as his hand grazed the edge of the counter beside me. The kitchen was quiet, save for the low hum of the fridge, but my pulse was anything but calm. Al's voice, low, teasing, and just a little dangerous, made my knees weaken before he even touched me. "Are you sure," he whispered, "that you can handle this, right here?" Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. The morning sun cut through the blinds, streaking golden light across the kitchen counter where I stood, my hands still dusted with flour. It should have been an ordinary Sunday, coffee brewing, pancakes sizzling, and the smell of maple syrup filling the air. But with Al, my husband of 3 years, nothing ever stayed ordinary for long. There was something about the way he moved, casual, confident, a little mischievous, that had my heartbeat racing before he even said a word. Al leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, his dark hair still tousled from sleep, a lazy grin playing on his lips. "You know," he said, watching me carefully, "you look entirely too focused on those pancakes when I'm standing right here." There was a challenge in his tone, one that made me pause, spatula hovering in the air. He had that way about him, turning the simplest moments into something electric, something that made me forget to breathe. We weren't always like this. Our marriage had its share of the mundane, the bills, the deadlines, the nights spent scrolling through our phones in silence. But lately, something had shifted. Maybe it was the way we'd both decided to stop taking each other for granted. Maybe it was the late-night conversations we'd had, confessing fears and desires we hadn't dared to say aloud before. Or maybe, it was just Al himself, finally showing me a side of him I didn't know I craved until now. He walked closer, slow and deliberate, his fingertips brushing against the cool marble of the counter as he stopped behind me. The air between us felt charged, as if the entire kitchen had shrunk to just this, me, him, and the unspoken tension crackling like static. I wanted to move, to speak, to do anything but stand there with my chest tightening and my breath catching. But the truth? A part of me didn't want the moment to end. "Pancakes can wait," he murmured, his lips dangerously close to my ear. His hand didn't touch me, not yet, but it hovered, tracing heat over my hip as if asking permission without words. I could feel every beat of my pulse, every flicker of anticipation coiling in my stomach. The world outside didn't exist, no dishes, no emails, no plans. Just the soft light, the smell of breakfast, and the quiet question hanging in the air between us. Before I could answer, before I could even decide what I wanted, the sharp sound of the front door unlocking echoed through the house. My breath hitched, my eyes flying open as Al pulled back, his expression shifting from playful to alert in an instant. Someone else was here. And whoever it was, they weren't supposed to be. The sharp click of the front door echoed like a gunshot through the quiet kitchen, shattering the air between us. I felt Al stiffen behind me, his warmth pulling away just enough to leave a cold, aching void where his presence had been. My heart was still racing, but now for an entirely different reason. My fingers gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles widening, as footsteps echoed down the hallway. We hadn't been expecting anyone. It was supposed to be just us today, a rare morning without plans, without people. The kind of day where we could afford to get lost in each other, to let the world outside stay far away. I turned to look at Al, his expression unreadable, though his jaw was tight, his eyes sharp and alert now. Whatever playful warmth had been there minutes ago was gone, replaced with a tension that only deepened the pounding in my chest. "Stay here," he whispered, his voice low, steady, but I could feel the edge beneath it. He wasn't just being cautious, there was something else, something personal, lingering in the weight of his tone. I wanted to ask him what was going on, who it could be, but the words stuck in my throat. Part of me didn't want to break the silence, afraid that speaking would make the moment too real. As the footsteps grew closer, 1,000 thoughts tumbled through my mind. Al had never given me a reason to doubt him, never a crack in the life we'd built together. But there had been little things lately, late nights at work, the unreadable texts he'd quickly pocket when I entered the room, the distant way he sometimes stared out the window as if replaying a memory I wasn't part of. I told myself I trusted him. I told myself I had no reason to question. And yet, standing there with my pulse hammering in my ears, I couldn't shake the dread curling in my stomach. The doorknob to the kitchen turned. I could see Al's shoulders tense, his hand twitching slightly at his side like he was bracing for something, or someone, he'd been expecting, but not like this. When the door swung open, the sunlight from the hallway spilled in, framing a figure I didn't recognize. And from the way Al froze, his face draining of color, I knew instantly, whoever this was, they weren't just here for breakfast. The figure in the doorway stepped forward, their features slowly coming into focus as the sunlight behind them softened. A woman, maybe mid-20s, confident in the way she stood, like she belonged here even though I had never seen her before. Her dark eyes swept the kitchen, landing on me briefly before settling on Al. She didn't speak right away, and neither did he. The silence between them felt heavier than the air itself, like a conversation was happening without words that I couldn't hear but could somehow feel. I turned to Al, searching his face for any clue, any sign that I was imagining the tension tightening the space between the three of us. But he wasn't looking at me. His eyes were locked on her, unreadable, his posture taut as though bracing for something inevitable. My chest tightened, the heat from the pancakes still steaming on the stove feeling distant, irrelevant, as a cold realization began to sink into my bones. Whoever she was, this wasn't just a stranger at our door. Al, she finally said, her voice calm but edged, like she had practiced this moment. We need to talk. Now. Her tone wasn't one of casual acquaintance. It was familiar, personal, maybe even intimate. I felt the sting of it before I could even process why. My throat tightened as I glanced between them, the soft morning light now feeling like a spotlight exposing cracks I didn't know were there. Al's jaw tightened as he turned toward me, his eyes flicking briefly to mine, and in that split second I saw something flicker across his face, guilt, maybe, or fear. It was gone almost instantly, replaced with the steady, controlled expression I knew too well. Babe, he said quietly, almost soothing, but his voice didn't reach my chest like it usually did. Can you give us a minute? The words hit harder than I expected, sharp and hollow. A part of me wanted to argue, to demand an explanation right then and there, but the way his eyes lingered on hers, not mine, rooted me in place. My pulse was still a wild drumbeat in my ears, the same pulse he had stirred moments ago in the quiet kitchen. But now it wasn't desire tightening in my chest. It was something darker, heavier, a twisting knot of dread and betrayal I couldn't name yet. I took a step back, the cool tile beneath my feet grounding me as the distance between us grew. I didn't leave the kitchen, not yet. I couldn't. My hands tightened at my sides as I watched her step closer to him, her expression softening just slightly as if this was a conversation they'd been needing to have for far too long. And as Al lowered his voice, leaning in to speak words I couldn't hear, one truth settled in my mind with sharp clarity. This morning, this kitchen, this moment, it wasn't about breakfast anymore. It was about everything I didn't know, and everything I was about to find out. The kitchen felt smaller now, the warm sunlight turning sharp, casting shadows across the floor like fractured glass. I stood still, my hands still resting on the counter, but my chest rose and fell with shallow breaths I couldn't steady. Al's voice was low as he spoke to her, words too soft for me to catch, though every murmur felt like a weight pressing harder against my ribs. I shouldn't care what they were saying. I shouldn't be straining to hear. And yet, I couldn't stop myself. The woman's eyes flicked toward me briefly, a quick glance that wasn't quite hostile, but it wasn't apologetic either. It was something else, something like recognition. Like she knew I didn't belong in whatever conversation this was. I gripped the counter tighter, the flour still dusting my fingers now smudged across the marble. My pulse was still quick from before, from Al's closeness, from the way his voice had teased at my ear not 10 minutes ago. That heat was still there, lingering like an echo, but now tangled with a sharp thread of uncertainty that made my stomach knot. Al turned back toward me, his face a mix of resolve and hesitation, and for a moment, the kitchen was silent again, just the faint sizzle of the cooling pancakes and the ticking of the clock above the sink. He took a step toward me, then stopped, his eyes darting to the woman as if unsure which way to move. That hesitation spoke louder than any words. I wanted to scream, to demand he explain everything, who she was, why she could walk into our house like she belonged here, why the look in his eyes now felt so different from the way he had looked at me against this same counter just moments before. But my voice wouldn't come. It wasn't just anger or jealousy gnawing inside me. It was fear. Fear of the answer, fear of what I already felt in my bones but didn't want to admit. The air felt heavy, like we were all standing on the edge of something that would change everything, one way or another. Al's hand lifted slightly, like he was about to reach for me, but then he let it drop, his jaw tightening. And in that suspended moment, with all three of us standing frozen in the quiet morning light, I knew the next words spoken, whoever they came from, would decide everything. The silence shattered when the woman near the doorway finally spoke again, her voice steady but carrying a weight that made the air thicken. "You didn't tell her yet, did you?" Her eyes flicked to me briefly, then back to Al, who stood rooted between us like someone caught in two worlds at once. Her words hung there, heavy, almost unreal, like they didn't belong in my kitchen, like they had been meant for a private conversation that had now spilled into my life. Al's hand raked through his hair, his shoulders rising and falling with a breath that sounded like it carried more than just nerves. "This isn't how I wanted this to happen," he muttered, voice low but sharp at the edges. His eyes shifted toward me, and for a second, I saw it, the same intensity he'd had earlier, when the world had been just the two of us, when his voice at my ear had sent shivers down my spine. That heat was still there, buried beneath guilt and panic, and it only made the sting of this moment sharper. "Tell me what?" I asked finally, my voice quieter than I meant, but it sliced through the room like glass anyway. My grip on the counter tightened, the flour from my fingertips leaving pale smears against the polished surface. The scent of maple syrup still lingered in the air, cloyingly sweet, so at odds with the bitterness rising in my throat. The other woman's expression softened, but not with kindness, more like someone who knew they were about to drop a match into gasoline. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said, her gaze steady on me now. "But Al hasn't been honest with you. About us. About what we used to be." My breath caught, a cold rush washing through me even as my skin burned from the memory of how close Al had been just moments ago, how I'd leaned into him, let myself forget everything but the warmth of his presence. My pulse still carried that echo, but now it felt wrong, like a ghost of something I wasn't sure I could trust anymore. Al took a step forward, closer to me, his hand lifting slightly like he wanted to reach for me but hesitated, his fingers curling instead into a fist. "It's not what it sounds like," he said, voice low, almost pleading. "But there's something you need to know, something I should have told you a long time ago." The woman's eyes didn't leave mine, and in that moment, I realized the tension between them wasn't just anger or awkwardness, it was history. History that had walked right into my kitchen, uninvited but undeniable. And as Al opened his mouth to speak, to finally unravel the truth, a sharp knock sounded from the front door, another interruption, another shadow stepping into the moment before I could hear the words that would change everything. The knock at the door echoed again, harder this time, jolting all three of us into motion. Al cursed under his breath, striding quickly toward the hall. The other woman's gaze followed him, but she didn't move, her arms folding loosely as if she had been expecting this interruption. My legs felt heavy as I turned, drawn by instinct to follow Al, my pulse thundering the same way it had when his breath had been at my ear earlier, but now from something entirely different. The door swung open, revealing a man in his early 30s, tall, sharply dressed, his expression tight with impatience. His eyes darted past Al and landed squarely on the woman standing in my kitchen. "You weren't answering your phone," he said flatly, before looking at Al with something I couldn't quite place, accusation, maybe, or warning. We need to end this. Today. The woman exhaled slowly, her confidence faltering just enough for me to catch it. She stepped forward, her tone measured but firm. She deserves to know, Al. If you don't tell her, I will. I turned to Al, my voice breaking through the heavy quiet. Tell me what? My words trembled, not from fear alone, but from the exhaustion of standing in this tension, of feeling like the floor beneath me was tilting. Al's shoulders dropped, his jaw clenching as he finally faced me. She's my ex-fiancée, he said, his voice rough but steady. Before you. She left without a word years ago, and now she's back, claiming she never signed away the business we started together. She's threatening to drag me through court if I don't meet with her. He paused, eyes softening toward me. That's it. That's why she's here. Not because of us, because of what we used to build, before you. The woman's jaw tightened, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she glanced at the man in the doorway, her lawyer, maybe, or someone more personal, and said quietly, "You still owe me answers, Al. But this isn't about her." The weight in my chest loosened slightly, but not completely. Relief mixed with something raw, because even if it wasn't betrayal in the way I feared, the morning's intimacy still felt like it had been stolen, tainted by shadows from his past. And as Al reached for my hand, his touch grounding but tentative, one thought echoed louder than any of the words spoken: the morning wasn't over yet, and neither was this story. When the front door finally closed behind Al's ex and the sharply dressed man, silence returned to the house. The only sounds left were the faint hum of the fridge and the soft ticking of the clock above the sink. My hand still trembled slightly, but the weight in my chest had shifted, less like a stone, more like something I could finally breathe through. Al stood a few feet away, his hands shoved into his pockets, his shoulders still tight as if waiting for me to say something that could break us or bring us back together. I turned back toward the counter, toward the cooling pancakes, toward the sunlight that still streaked gold across the kitchen tiles. The same place where, not an hour ago, my pulse had been racing for entirely different reasons. That memory, the way his breath had ghosted over my neck, the way his voice had lowered to that teasing, dangerous whisper, still lingered like static in the air. But now, layered beneath it, there was something deeper. Fear, yes. Doubt, too. But also clarity. "I should have told you," Al said finally, his voice low, honest now in a way it hadn't been earlier. "Not because there's anything between us, there isn't. But because keeping it from you, that's not us. That's not the kind of marriage I want." His words weren't smooth, not perfectly timed or delivered, but they were real. I turned to him, my throat tight but my voice steady. "I don't care about her," I said, softer than I expected. "I care about you not looking at me like I'm the one standing on the outside of your life." For the first time since the knock on the door, his expression softened. He closed the space between us, his hand finding mine, not tentative this time, but firm, grounding. The warmth of his touch was familiar, steady, and the pulse in my chest, though still fast, no longer felt like it was spiraling out of control. He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine, his voice a whisper that brought the morning full circle. "Are you sure," he murmured, echoing the words that had set everything in motion, "that you can handle me, right here?" This time, I didn't hesitate. I didn't flinch. I simply let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and whispered back, "Yes." The pancakes were cold. The coffee had gone lukewarm. The morning had been torn apart and stitched back together in ways I didn't see coming. But as Al's arms slid around me, pulling me close against the golden light of the kitchen, I realized it wasn't about breakfast anymore. It was about us, messy, imperfect, complicated, but still ours.